Hi everyone, welcome to Bear in Mind's gaming show. It's been a while. There hasn't been a huge amount of big news, so we took a little break. But we're back for a short one today. Just a few little discussions on some of the updates that have happened in the meantime. Excuse me. Where should we start? Should we go with?
Well, the Series S is definitely a thing,
It certainly is.
judging
Yes.
from leaked packaging for the new controllers, which have started hitting the wild.
Yep. So our speculation that possibly Lockhart didn't exist after the Xbox conference the other week, well, game showcase, sorry, the other week, was wrong. It seems. It's just a question of time now, I think, before they actually reveal the Series S.
Yeah,
It probably is going to be a console as well, as opposed to the other speculation of it
they've
being a dongle or something like that. So,
they've got an August event, haven't they?
um, maybe I think they have.
Yeah.
I think they're supposed to, but I saw a post today that it might have been pushed back to early September.
Uh,
It could be that we're waiting until then. I know, obviously, they're still playing the cat and mouse game with Sony of who's going to announce prices first. I think. Um, I think at this point it's certainly safe to say that the Series S is going to be very affordable,
yeah.
um, um, and the Series X. I don't know. I'm still of the mind that I think that they might go for a slightly more expensive price point on the Series X, um, especially if they can get the Series S down to like $300.
Yeah.
Um, then they can use that most powerful games console ever, etc., etc. Best place to play, all of that. They can justify a nice high price point for the Series X if they can get a $300 Series S out there, especially with the value of Game Pass. I mean, let's face it, for $15 a month or £12 a month in the UK, you're not going to get better value in gaming, really. So if you can get
No.
a $300 console and Game Pass for the majority of the users, and then for the hardcore that really want that big boy games console, then yeah, sure, 500, maybe even 600 for the
I.
Series X. I mean, I doubt it'll be 600,
Yeah.
but I think that like with how powerful it is, um, the fact that obviously the rumor is that the Series S will be HD only.
Yeah.
It will support probably support 60 frames per second, maybe even 120, which is why it will stay at HD rather than trying to force 4K
But
out of
there's
it.
there's also the rumours
Um,
that the PS5 struggles with 4K.
well, everything does. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of Digital Foundry videos recently, and even very 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 high end PCs. And let's face it, like the guys at Digital Foundry are going to have some of the best PCs available at their disposal. Even the highest of the highest end of PCs at the moment don't tend to do true 4K,
I think.
because if you've got all your sliders up to the max, the frame rate drop is
And that's the
just
thing, isn't it?
disgusting.
It's
Yeah,
4K with low, with say 4K with
mm.
potentially 30 FPS.
Or even less.
Yeah.
That's
Or
and unstable, because the bigger crime when it comes to frames per second isn't necessarily going low, especially with a single player game. With multiplayer, it like going low is an
yeah.
issue, but it's when it's unstable,
So
because
it's up and down.
that's when you notice it more. You can get away with 30 frames per second for a single player narrative game, as long as it's a solid 30 frames per second and it doesn't dip. If you're up and down and up and down and up, that's when your brain goes, "What the hell's going on?" and you feel a bit sick, and it gets a bit clunky and things. And that's what happens even with the highest end PCs at the moment.
Yeah.
That you've got the ability to do a true 4K, but not necessarily at the frame rate that you want it to be at, and definitely not at the stability that you want it to be at. So, having watched a lot of these videos, there's obviously there's things like the checkerboarding that's already used on things like the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X. That's used in PC, but there's also a rival technique that does a really nice job of upscaling from 1440p to 4K, and even actually upscaling from 1080p all the way up to 4K, and doing a really lovely job of it. So I think, quite frankly, the news of PS5 struggles with 4K is a bit of a misnomer in a way.
Depends on how much they want to sell that fact, though, doesn't it? It all depends on how much they're hinging on selling 4K, if you get me. Like, how big of a problem that is depends on how heavy Sony wants to market.
I mean, it
4K.
Also depends on, like, I mean, there's 4K and there's 4K. Like, I mean, you look at films, for instance, and there's 4K real cinemas in, like, real world, like, and then there's a 4K animated thing. And, like, say if you had South Park in 4K, like, woohoo, wow, you've just got a big block of red.
Well, that's fair. Most films aren't 4K. Most films, and it's the problem you have with 4K discs, finding a native 4K film, because most films, at least modern films, it's why you tend to find older films that have been remastered are true 4K on, like, 4K Blu-ray, but modern films aren't, because say the latest Marvel film, the latest Star Wars film, they tend to be finished with a 2K master because of special effects,
or a 2.5K or something.
The special effects aren't done at 4K. It might have been shot. The film it was shot on may have a resolution of, but then it's mastered at 2K. So what you get on a lot of 4K film releases is an upscaled 2K film with HDR then added on.
My point was more along the lines of, like, obviously there's a difference between, like, say 4K where it matters and 4K where it doesn't matter, and obviously when you've got things like some, again, I suppose, like a Marvel film where you want as much detail as possible, then that 4K matters, whereas, like, if you had a South Park episode in 4K, would it really matter? I mean, as we've discussed before, like the upscaling of cartoons on things like Netflix, or even just watching it natively from one of your own discs, it works significantly better because it's solid colour. And I think that's where with potentially moving on to the next topic of Halo Infinite, that's where Halo Infinite is falling down a little bit, because they are doing it at 4K. It's a native 4K, but the art direction isn't what we expect from next gen. So that image is most certainly a 4K image, and it's running at 60 frames per second, and I think the multiplayer is potentially up to 120. I know definitely with the racing games, the Xbox is aiming at 120. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, like, as a consumer, we've got to have ever so slightly more realistic expectations of actually what 4K means, and because resolution isn't necessarily graphical detail, as Halo has shown.
Well, also, out of the twin technologies of come out, at least in film, you had 4K and HDR, right? HDR is actually the part that makes... 4K is a bit of a resolution bump over 1080, right?
It's a huge resolution. Like, it's
not as huge as 1080 was over SD, though.
I mean, I think
visually it's a lot harder.
Yeah, but I think we've got
the difference.
But I think that's because we now have bigger TVs anyway, and we've had better TVs, and whereas
even then, it's what 4K are you getting? 4K on a disc. Like 4K through Netflix still doesn't necessarily look as good as a 1080p Blu-ray. because the Blu-ray has much higher bit rates.
Yeah.
But I think HDR is the tech that visually makes the most, when it's good, makes the most difference, because it's for colours popping, it's for shadows being shadowier.
Exactly, and I think that's where, like, in this generation in particular, the coming generation, that's where art design and art direction are really, really going to be incredibly important.
Yeah.
Because, like, they're immensely powerful machines, and no doubt we'll get a mid-console cycle as well, where we get the pro version of each. But as Ghost of Tsushima has shown, art direction is key. People are blown away by how beautiful that game looks. I mean, unfortunately I've not played it yet, but there are people who are still now marveling over it, and directly comparing that game to what Xbox showed off with Halo Infinite.
Yeah.
And in theory, Halo Infinite, I mean, obviously it wasn't running on a Series X, it was running on a PC that they claimed was comparable to the Series X power. But when that entire game showcase was, when it wasn't focusing on Game Pass, it was focusing on how powerful the Series X is. When your Series X launch game, now not launch, we'll talk about that in a sec, is not as pretty as the outgoing PlayStation 4 game, then you've got some serious questions to answer.
Yeah, well, as you just say, Halo's now been delayed.
Now been pushed back. Yeah.
Probably the right choice for Halo.
I think so. I think with it being a launch title, I think multiplayer is still launching. I think.
Is it?
I haven't seen, well, because it was going to be free, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I have a feeling the whole package is delayed.
I mean, I hope they don't. I hope they go right sod it. Have some multiplayer maps.
That would be fun.
It might not even be the full multiplayer experience, but like, I think especially as a thank you for the early adopters for the Series X and potentially the Series S, like, give them that game, give them the. Because they had even thought about putting the single player out in chunks to make it prettier and, like, kind of give you patches and what have you. But I think if they send out at least a couple of maps of the multiplayer, which again, remember, it's going to be running at 60 frames per second minimum. Like, it might be higher. That's a reasonable little kind of sorry, I suppose. I think the other issue is, like, obviously you look at the games that Halo was going to go up against. Like, even within the Xbox, forget what Sony's doing. But even within, like, just the Xbox, if the Series X and Series S are launching when it's probably launching, so early-ish November.
Well, they have confirmed November as a date for the console.
Yeah, but not exactly when.
But November.
So it was essentially going to go head to head with the new Assassin's Creed and with Cyberpunk.
And the Medium is apparently a launch title.
Yeah, and, like, Halo didn't look as good as any of those three. So there would have been a lot of people, as good as the game may have been, that would have, I think, unjustly decided not to buy it. And obviously, even with Game Pass, there might have been a case of people just ignoring it because, it's free, but it's not good enough.
Well,
on
that topic of Game Pass, right?
And
I've recently become the owner of a PC.
Yes.
And it enters this boat of, well, definitely don't need this Series X again.
Yeah.
Because all those Game Pass games, right?
They're right there.
Yep. Maybe some things might be console only, but
then
I've
you
still
also
got the
get
Series S. I've got the One S still, so.
But I mean, you've also got the PC only games, because there are a few PC only games like Gears Tactics.
That's coming. That's a launch title for. It was buried in. It was buried in all the kind of.
All the nonsense.
Yeah, but Tactics is coming to, and I wonder if that's why they held it away from the.
I imagine it'll probably still play better on a PC because a Tactics style game.
Yeah.
Can't imagine being great on a control pad. It's probably one of those.
It's a small tactics game. It's more like XCOM, so. It will play better on PC. But I wonder if that's why it didn't hit. Because it was weird that this game was PC only, right? And I wonder if it didn't launch it so we could hold it for.
It was weird, but I think it was also a case of like if you're gonna do it, you need to make sure it's gonna work. And if you're that close to a console launch as well, it's an extra piece of, it's an extra bit for that console launch.
Yeah.
So, hold it, make sure it works well, and do your due diligence. Fair enough.
Also, in regards to weird art direction, the Marvel Avengers beta has been going on this past weekend for PlayStation users. Yes. I believe it's open for Xbox and PC users this coming weekend.
Have you played it?
Yeah, I didn't finish it.
No.
I played through the opening level that we've seen of a demo of for Golden Gate Bridge. I know that's been at some expos as well. It was at EGX last year. I've got a friend who played it there. That's really fun. It gives you a taste for all the characters. Then you go into a level where you play as Hulk, and it's a weird, unholy hybrid between Destiny, bad versions of Uncharted mechanics, and Ultimate Alliance.
Yeah.
The Ultimate Alliance games have never been great, but they've given you all the Marvel characters, so it's fun. You kind of play through the thing with Ultimate Alliance was you always played through a slightly naff game because it gave you the fun of having like 50-odd Marvel characters to play as.
But I think the thing with the Ultimate Alliance games is that like, especially by the time the second one came out, that they had defined themselves as what it was.
Yeah.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head in that this looks like a game that probably should have been an Ultimate Alliance game.
No, it looks like a game that should be better. Like
yeah. But I mean, it's kind of. It doesn't know whether it is an Ultimate Alliance game or if it's a Destiny or if
it should be Spider-Man for the Avengers. Not necessarily the same style of game, but a high-budget Avengers experience. And it's weird opening treasure chests. I think it might vary depending on what character you're playing on. I could understand opening treasure chests as Iron Man, right, and getting a different gauntlet.
Yeah.
But playing as the Hulk, what you get in treasure chests is new shin bones.
Yeah, you get new bones, don't you? So you upgrade your rib cage and stuff like that.
Feels
odd.
Yeah, like you're trying to shoehorn Destiny in, but you don't know how to make it thematically fit.
Yeah.
And I know if I carried on playing, I would have got to play as Miss Marvel, and Miss Marvel is a character I love, and I really want to play as her. That was the one hope I had, one of the major hopes I have of this game, like a cool Miss Marvel video game. And I know it's mostly her story, apparently, the campaign.
Yeah, and I think that's the beacon of hope, really.
Yeah.
In that, like, they have chosen a single character to be the main focus.
But I didn't have the patience to get through the Hulk stuff.
Yeah.
To get to it, like, there's a lot of wall running, but not great wall running. Like, it just.
It feels like a missed opportunity.
Everyone's been quite down on that game for some time, and I had hope that I was the person who was like, oh no, I think there's a chance it could be good.
I mean, I've watched a lot of people talk about it and obviously seen plenty of footage. And it seems like a game that is going to have a very dedicated audience. It won't necessarily be a massive audience, but I have a feeling that as long as it's well supported, it might be a very dedicated audience that doesn't go away or doesn't dwindle significantly. Once like say come January, I think they are going to be the numbers. Whoever's playing in January is whoever's going to be playing until that game is killed.
Yeah. I don't think it's for me, unfortunately.
Well, fair enough. Not everything is.
And that's fine. It doesn't have to be. I'm just a little disappointed because I wanted it to be.
Yeah. Sticking with Marvel and with Spider-Man, Insomniac showed off some little images the other day showing off their ray tracing. I think that was a little
I've not actually seen these.
It was a little nod to Puddlegate as well.
Show him the water.
It was Miles squatting over a puddle in the spider pose.
Oh wait, no, I did see it.
Yeah,
it looked good.
Yeah, it looks lovely. And I think obviously depending on how they price it, because they haven't announced pricing on that yet.
No.
I'm still not entirely sure that they won't bundle that.
I think they will.
I mean, I'm not even saying there's an extra cost. Like, I think potentially if you buy a PS5 before Christmas, then you get a free copy of Spider-Man Ultimate Edition with Miles Morales. Because obviously when you buy the Miles Morales version, it comes with the PS5 up-ramped version of the original game as well. So excuse me.
I was going to finally finish Spider-Man, but I think I might actually hold on and replay the whole thing on PS5.
You're close enough now. It was one of my favourite games of the generation. Yeah. It's one of my very, very rare platinums because it was a well curated list of achievements or trophies, and where it's one of those games that you don't have to play it on hard to get the platinum.
Yeah.
And I thoroughly appreciated that. Doesn't mean that there wasn't challenge. There was plenty of challenge. There's plenty of annoying little bits that you like. Like later on with Taskmaster, to finish off a couple of his little bits are fiddly, but on the whole, it was an achievable platinum and a very, very enjoyable experience.
I think one of the final pieces of major news. Apple's been in the news a lot the past couple of weeks.
Indeed, Apple like banning outside games sources essentially. So if you don't go through the iTunes, well, not iTunes, it's not called that.
The App Store.
If you don't go through the App Store, you don't get to play on our devices.
But not even that. So they don't allow streaming services unless the streamer owns all the games being streamed.
Yep.
So it means xCloud and Stadia cannot. And Microsoft and Apple have been negotiating this, and those negotiations just stopped from Apple's side of things by the sound of it. They just decided, you know what, no.
Yep.
Which, it's going to be interesting because I know the Samsung's phones are apparently going to have xCloud baked into them.
Yeah, and apparently some of the newer TVs as well.
Yeah, and it'll work on Android devices in general.
Yeah.
Apple, I'm an iPhone user, but I do think Apple are cutting themselves out of a good chunk of people who want phones right now. Yeah. That's going to be a deciding factor for some people.
For some people, I think though with Microsoft, potentially Apple have taken a risk that might pay off, because if you look at the Xbox sales, if you look at the lack of exclusives, like good exclusives in the last gen in particular, that in the short term at least, this isn't necessarily going to hurt Apple. It will hurt Apple in 2 years' time if xCloud is working well.
And what could have hurt Apple, but won't, because Google joined in for a tag team, is the Fortnite fiasco.
Yeah, I mean, with that, I don't have a huge amount of sympathy for Epic themselves.
No.
However,
Epic is someone with a lot of power who could change. You could force them to behave better. Not Epic isn't acting out of any sense of decency, and I actually think Epic trying to weaponize a bunch of teenagers who love Fortnite a little bit iffy, but
Epic's made it worse for themselves, though. Because not only has Apple punished Epic themselves, Apple has punished those who use Unreal, because now the Unreal development tools within iOS have been blocked.
Yes.
Which means that if you are an indie dev that uses Unreal, because as with Unreal and Unity and a couple of others as well, they are free to use and then free up until a certain amount of revenue. All these indie devs that potentially are Unreal devs but not necessarily work for Epic are now suddenly left without a means to make their games. They could be 99% ready to drop a game, and now, because of the way that Epic's behaved,
I mean, there's still plenty of platforms they can drop on.
There are.
They just can't drop on Macs.
And they're not as well curated. The Play Store is a disgusting mess. I mean, not that.
But Google's also. I mean, Google's booted Fortnite, so it might not be long until Google boots.
Yeah.
Epic kind of. So both Google and Apple have kicked Fortnite off a store.
Yeah. So it's strange times, very, very strange times.
The thing is, there's no getting around the fact that it's three incredibly rich companies getting into it with each other, and it's hard to feel sympathy for any of those three companies. I'm not going to paint. I do think Apple and Google are the ones fundamentally in the wrong, but I'm at the same time not going to paint Epic as a hero.
Yeah, as I say, I don't feel sorry in the slightest for Epic themselves. I feel sorry for those that use Epic's tools.
It might lead to, if they win the various lawsuits, is Apple and Google having to be fairer with the cuts they take and what they allow on their store. I
think
interesting times.
Definitely. I do wonder, with going slightly off games consoles, gaming. I do wonder with Apple in the coming generations moving towards their proprietary silicon.
How well would games have functioned?
I'm more thinking that they're trying to double down on making sure that their ecosystem is theirs, and therefore potentially, obviously, that rumoured Apple games console, it might not be a games console as such, but having a solid platform that is on all of their devices, because obviously it's going to make. Yeah,
that's a downside to Apple Silicon I hadn't thought about, right? Right now, you can install programs on a Mac that you're not getting from Apple.
Yeah.
Once they're functioning on Apple Silicon, much like an iPhone and an iPad, the App Store is pretty much your only legitimate way to get stuff for it. Because I don't think many people use the App Store for Mac.
No.
Not in the same way they use it for the iDevices.
I mean, I use it for certain things. I think that, it's...
I've bought stuff through it, but...
Oh, I've bought stuff through it, and I think that, I'll potentially use it in the future again, depending on what I need to get. There's some good, cheaper equivalents of certain things, like script writing software or stuff like that. If you want, obviously... Final Draft is still about £100, but you can go and get some very competent Final Draft level.
Yeah, things like Scrivener and.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's a free one or whether it's one that you may be paying £20 for, but £20 is still significantly cheaper.
There's some fantastic equivalents to Photoshop and stuff on there as well. But if you don't want to get into the Adobe scam. Because it does really feel like Adobe is a scam these days.
I think if you're using it, I think like with any like software as a service thing, that Adobe isn't a bad thing, but it's really that case of, are you professional level enough to and making enough money?
But then I've seen even like pros who do use it trying to pull away themselves off from it. But we're diverging well off topic there. This is a video game news, not computing software news.
Indeed. What else has happened recently? So we've discussed. Going back to Insomniac, teasing things.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked about them teasing Microsoft by showing some ray tracing off in some puddles. Insomniac have been teasing some Resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably going to be just some remasters of the trilogy that was on the PlayStation 3. Obviously, with Sony's version of backwards compatibility, and basically just because of how bloody difficult it is to get those games running on anything that isn't a PlayStation 3, they are likely doing a remaster of the trilogy so that people can play it. Hopefully this leads to a sequel, although they're a busy team. So I know they're a very big and very efficient team, but they're a busy team. So I do wonder whether maybe Sony's got a different team working on a Resistance sequel.
Yeah.
Again, I do remember reading a couple of years ago of Sony putting together a team a bit like Microsoft are doing with the Initiative, of it being a super team of sorts.
Yeah.
And but it seemed to be one that was focusing, well, that was made up of people who'd worked in shooters and that sort of realm before. So I have wondered whether Sony's trying to make a shooter in the background somewhere.
Maybe
that they haven't told us about, because it is the one thing really that
we don't have at the moment.
They've never really had. I mean, you look at the
Killzone.
PlayStation. Well, yeah, I mean it had Killzone, but it never really set the world on fire. It was beautiful, absolutely stunning game.
I played a lot of Killzone, both online and Killzone 2 specifically.
I mean, I loved playing it, but it never quite hit the heights that I think Sony hoped it to. And with Guerrilla concentrating on Horizon now, there's no way that we're getting another shooter from Guerrilla. Unless it. So yeah.
If we move on to let's just let the viewers know what we've been playing.
What I've been playing. Well, obviously, surprise, surprise, some Gran Turismo. Last week was hard, really hard. What's the date today? It's the 18th, so we're recording this on the 18th of August. Last week's races didn't get a single win, even though there was a combination of track and group that I probably stood a chance with. It was Suzuka, the Grand Prix track in Japan, which is arguably my favourite real world track. And Group 3 GT cars, which I'm quite comfortable with usually, but I just wasn't quite fast enough last week. Looks like it might be the same case this week. But I've also been playing a fair amount of Fall Guys.
I have dabbled in it myself. It is rather fun. Frustrating, but fun.
It's frustrating as hell. Especially in the team games when you end up with a shitty team.
I'm no good in the team games.
I'm fine at the team games. It just depends on whether the rest of the team is any good. I had a frustrating evening the other evening where literally every single team game I had was full of idiots.
Tail tag I'm okay at.
Oh, I mean, like tail tag, was a fine example where it was the team version rather than the every man for himself version.
Oh, is there an every man for himself version of it?
Yeah, when it gets down to the lower numbers, there's an every man for himself version. With the foxtail thing.
Yeah.
yeah. And of the, I think the 3 times that I played that game, that particular one that night, uh, every time that match started, one of my team members stole the tail from another one of my own team members.
I've done that before.
Whether it was stealing it from me or stealing it from someone else, but it was just like you did read the instructions, didn't you? You can read. You do know the aim of the game. So it got to the point that like when it popped again, I just stood in the same place and just waited.
Yeah.
Because it was just chaos. Because it was just full of idiots that night. So, but then conversely, I think on the previous night, I was very lucky and ended up in great teams where I think if we did lose, it was a very narrow loss. I think it was in one of the football or soccer based ones. Yeah. So, have you won one yet?
No.
No. I've got to the final round twice,
I've never got far than like 4th round.
Sometimes 4th is the last round. Depending on exactly how they eliminate. Usually it's the 5th round, but sometimes it's the 4th round.
I'm okay. I'm pretty good at the ones that involve running from one end to the other, avoiding stuff.
Yeah, if it's just a plain race.
Yeah, but everything else is not my strong point. I've been playing what may end up being one of my favourite games of all time by the time I get to the end of it, if it keeps shaping up like this.
Okay.
Disco Elysium.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned this last time.
It is a PC RPG. It is coming to consoles soon, Switch and I think both Xbox and PS4.
Yeah, I'll certainly be giving it a dabble. I might play it on the Switch because I imagine with the touchscreen it'll
potentially
possibly be a bit better.
It's available on both Mac and Windows as well at the moment. It's just you play a detective who wakes up after a harsh night of drinking, and you can't remember who you are or anything about yourself, and you're in the middle of a murder investigation.
Yeah.
And everything and it's wandering around this city talking to people, trying to find out what happened. Your inner bodily functions and mind talk to you as well. You were clearly having a bad time of it.
Yeah.
And it's something everyone should experience for themselves, so I don't really want to say too much because I think a lot of discussion of this are spoilers. But if you like RPGs, you owe it to yourself to give this game a try because it certainly just feels like a phenomenal
game I will. Yeah. I think it's. I've heard excellent things on it, so it's certainly something I'm going to give a crack.
Yeah. So
yeah.
We've got. I think we'll end this on. We've got DC Fandom coming up
this coming weekend.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're going to be both separately partaking in some of the events at DC Fandom because obviously it's an online only convention with panels and things. And
so we'll be dipping in when we can over the weekend.
And then we're gonna next week we'll record our views on what was announced there, what was shown, both video games and films. And over on the video game side of things, Rocksteady are showing off their new Suicide Squad game.
And Warner Brothers Montreal showing.
Rumoured to be showing Court of Owls.
Oh no, they've said they're definitely showing their game. They haven't said what it is, but it is Court of Owls.
Yeah.
Like there's like, it's going to be an odd one because obviously there's been a lot of turmoil in the last couple of months at Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
As a whole, after being bought out by AT&T.
Let a lot of people on the comic side, but let a lot of people at DC go.
Well, I mean, before they did all that, they were deciding whether or not to
sell the video game studios. Yeah.
And I think potentially someone said, "Oh, hi, look, we can make more money out of the video games division. So let's just fire all the comic book artists and whoever else." So they've cut the fat in a different division.
It was editors more than anything that were let go.
Yeah,
they don't obviously. Artists are freelancers.
Mm.
But
So it'll it'd be a strange one because obviously it's like potentially DC as a unit, especially with whatever the parent company want to make of it now, is definitely going to be steering more towards games and TV and cinema.
Well, no, I don't think that's inherently true. They are changing heavily the direction of what kind of books are published. I think on the book side of things, it's a shift towards potentially straight to bookstore graphic novels more than monthly periodicals. But that's potentially a topic for maybe the DC Fandom episode itself. And we will see you all then, I think.
Yes, we will. So if any more news gaming wise happens in the meantime, other than the documented Rocksteady and WB Montreal games, then we'll probably cover those next week as well at the tail end of the Fandom show. But for now, thank you very much, and see you again soon, James.
All right, have a good time.
Bye. Cool. Don't know how long that was. Oh, that's all right.